Welcome everyone to the part two of the El Paso webinars this week. I believe we've started a little bit early and we have a few more attendees who have registered in advance who should be joining us. We'll have those folks pick up as we go forward. My name is Dub Taylor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Texas PACE Authority, and I was with you on Monday earlier this week to provide an overview of PACE generally with some local participants. And today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the nuts and bolts of how to put a PACE project together. So with that intro, I'm going to disable my video so you can look more clearly at the screen and not at me talking, and then we'll take Q&A and responses at the end. So please add those as we go along. So as I mentioned, this is a two-part session on Monday on December 1st. The PACE Outreach Forum, I think a number of you attended that, looking at the registration lists. I saw some familiar names. And then today, again, a little bit deeper dive. The recording of the webinar for Monday is going to be posted on the Texas PACE Authority's webpage under Resources, then Education and Outreach. So we'll be able to access it there and share that with any colleagues or anyone that may not have been able to attend live. We'll also be posting this webinar in the same location. So again, available to share with others who may be interested in these things. The partners we have locally in El Paso, the County of El Paso is the entity that actually has established a PACE program, so it's county-wide. The City of El Paso is a supporting partner, the El Paso Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and then the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, supported by El Paso Community College as well. And I would have to say again that we have support from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They have some focused resources to support energy and environmental, clean energy and environmental programs along the border, and this is one of those activities. So this is me. I've joined Texas PACE Authority in February of this year. I served the last 2 decades as the director of the Texas State Energy Conservation Office. And then prior to that, I had experience in the commercial real estate sector, property appraisal, and ad valorem tax consulting. So now wearing the PACE hat, I guess not the hard hat below, but the PACE hat sort of draws those two things together. The Texas PACE Authority is a nonprofit created in Texas specifically to administer PACE programs on behalf of local governments. Once the PACE legislation that enabled local governments to develop PACE programs passed, no local government really wanted to create a whole PACE department, which is understandable. So our nonprofit was created to fill that void and to backstop local governments and operate the programs on their behalf. So we work for local government specifically to administer the programs. We work with property owners to help understand how PACE may fit their buildings' needs and how to improve their assets. We work with the different types of capital providers, both big and small, to help them figure out where those investment opportunities are within the state. And then with service providers, which I think many of you today are service providers, to understand the PACE process, which is technically based, and so there's a lot of details, understandably. So again, what is PACE? What is Texas PACE? Property assessed clean energy, and then financing really is the key. That is always left off, but that's really what this is all about. It is a way to access lower interest, long-term financing for energy and water efficiency projects and distributed generation. So the types of things we're talking about. So what is Texas PACE? Again, 100% financing long-term commercial, industrial, multifamily properties. And the key to this all is that it's repaid via a special property assessment over the useful life of the improvements. This program is state authorized, Chapter 399 of the Local Government Code. It's voluntary and it's open market, and it's local government enabled and passed, as in the case in El Paso County, and then nonprofit administered, which is what we do. So today, what I want to cover are these topics. We're going to talk about leveraging PACE for comprehensive projects, how you can get more things done utilizing this financing structure, the process flow, how the financing works, how the construction works, the technical report structure, the third-party review requirement, and then some ongoing resources to help support you as these projects move forward. So let's first look at comprehensive. So PACE, unlike conventional financing, a much longer repayment term. With conventional financing for equipment, typically it's 5, 6, maybe 7 years, but usually 5 is probably the normal case. This is because these are unsecured loans, meaning that if you default, if the owner defaults, the lender is probably not going to come remove and salvage the equipment. So they want their repayments back sooner, and typically the interest rates are maybe a little higher as well. With PACE, that's out over the term of the useful life of the equipment. So it's cash flow positive day one. And what this means is that from a contractor's or a service provider's perspective, if you typically go in, say you're an HVAC contractor, that is your special to help identify and help identify for an owner what the HVAC opportunities are in the building. You may not have the expertise to evaluate lighting, building management systems, insulation, other aspects. And so there may be a missed opportunity there. So if you bundle the projects together, HVAC, lighting, building management systems, controls, water fixtures, you name it, and finance them all as one package, then the quicker payback items, which are typically things like lighting, can help leverage the longer payback items and result in a project that has an acceptable overall payback for the owner. So it really is important. And if you do these projects one-off, say you just do the lighting, then that means that's no longer available to leverage these other projects. So it's important to step back, assess what the facility really needs, develop a scope that includes everything, and see how much you can get done at one time. There are going to be some things that probably are going to fall off and not be able to be implemented. They may be value engineered out. It's a term that we're all familiar with in this industry, but PACE allows you to sort of rebundle and move the whole project together in a way that benefits the building as a integrated system, not just individual components. So one of the key ratio requirements for PACE is that in Texas, we have a savings to investment ratio requirement. And that means that the savings, the overall savings projected over the life of the assessment is equal to or greater than the total cost of the project. And again, to support the idea of leveraging, you may just have an HVAC system that may have a 25 or a 30-year payback, and maybe it has a 15 or a 20-year life. So that may not qualify on its own, but bundling that with lighting could bring it into some acceptable range on the savings side. So the simple calculation here, as it's laid out, $1 million project, including the financing costs. So we look at all the costs associated with the project in Texas, and we look at the projected savings then over, let's say, a 20-year assessment of $1.5 million, and that meets the SIR requirement. So in Texas, it has to be greater than one or greater, and in this scenario, it would meet that requirement. We have a report summary that is used to provide an analysis of the different proposed utility cost reduction measures. This is a table from that summary, and what you can see is as you sort of stack these up, ECM, that would be an energy conservation measure 1, down to WCM, water conservation measure 1, you list those out, you sum up the costs, you sum up the savings, and you can there understand, how there is benefit to a bundled comprehensive project. And in El Paso, we talked about this earlier in the week. There are a couple of marquee projects that illustrate this comprehensive approach and kind of this bundling impact. So the Plaza Hotel, which Greenworks, Sean Ribble described on Monday, needed everything. It was an old hotel, 100 years old, that had been not in use for a while. which meant that you needed lighting, HVAC, elevator motors. This is something that you may not immediately think of as part of a PACE project, but elevator motors, building envelope, the windows, and then plumbing fixtures. All of these things combined together and taken as a package met all of the payback requirements and qualified for PACE. They also were able to incorporate historic tax credits, and so the assessment on this was $9.2 million from a PACE perspective, very significant electric and very significant water savings from the project. So again, the benefits of a comprehensive approach. And then we also heard about Simon Property. We heard specifically about the Cielo Vista Mall, and that was one of 5 Simon Property malls that actually closed on the same day in 5 different parts of the state, but funded under one assessment. So that's a possibility too. It takes obviously some coordination, but here what Simon did is they applied a sort of a common set of measures to multiple properties as part of one financing package. So here you had HVAC, you had energy management systems, you had lighting, you had water, a total of $9 million for all of these projects. So the process flow on financing for PACE. We have underwriting metrics, and these are designed to meet the requirements in state law for commercial PACE projects. First of all, the assessment to the assessed value ratio. This is to ensure that you're not over leveraging the PACE funded project relative to the value of the property. And currently, our published guideline is that the improved value, this is post-construction or stabilized value, cannot exceed 20% of the assessed property value. The assessment cannot exceed 20% of the assessed property value. This is actually changing. This is moving to 25% based on recommendations we have from our advisory team. And so that's one. The next key underwriting metric is, again, the savings to investment ratio. We covered this. That has to be greater than 1. And then in each of these cases, there can be variances that are granted on a case-by-case basis. We'll look at specific situations. It may be that certain equipment is needed that makes sense for other reasons, and there's acceptance for that by the county in this case, and so that there may be a variance that's allowed. And then another key thing in Texas is that if the property has an existing mortgage consent is required. So this becomes a senior lien, a PACE assessment becomes a senior lien, and the mortgage holder, if there is one, needs to understand how that interacts with their existing lien and their existing mortgage. And so they provide consent, and they have on a number of projects in Texas where there's an existing mortgage. The application process flow looks like this, and I realize this is kind of an eye chart, a lot to look at, and I'm not going to read through it all, but this is sort of start to finish. And I've highlighted here the financial components. So the first one on the left is initiate the technical and underwriting review and issue a pre-approval letter. That is where a PACE financing partner will come into play and work with the owner to help complete that task. Then you move on to the next, you follow the arrows. There's an underwriting review that's completed, assuming everything still moves forward. Then the applicant and the lender sign the contract with the county, and a lien is recorded on the property that secures the financing. The financing closes, then it becomes available to the owner for construction. So the financing components of the application process are highlighted here. Capital providers, there are a number of them, and I should say that those that are listed on our website here, this is more for convenience. These are capital providers that have completed a form that indicates they've got the financial backing, they're established, and they are in a position to finance PACE projects. Any capital provider, however, could potentially fund a PACE loan or a PACE project. This could be a bank, a credit union, a specialty lender, any type. So we have these on our website now, mostly for convenience, but that should not be seen as a limitation if you have another capital provider or preferred capital provider in mind. The two that are circled there, the ones that have financed projects in El Paso. Greenworks, as mentioned earlier, financed the Plaza Hotel, and Petros was involved in the mall renovations for Simon. So on the construction side pretty much looks like this. This is a simplified version. And there's two key roles here, the contractor and the ITPR. ITPR stands for Independent Third Party Reviewer. And we'll go into that more in a bit. But the process works like this. The contractor and or the owner can conduct the baseline energy and water analysis. That then moves to the ITPR, where they do a savings review. The savings review then supports the project construction. And then at the end of the project, the ITPR comes back and does an installation verification to make sure the project is operating as intended. And that's required under state law. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each of these things. Again, looking at the application process flow, the areas circled are where the contractor and the ITPR and really the technical participants in the project are involved. So again, like on the financial side, the technical and underwriting and pre-approval, they're involved at that stage. The ITPR at the bottom, the owner would engage the ITPR. This is anyone, an engineer that is selected by the owner. Financial review is completed and the savings to investment ratio is calculated. And then again, after the project on the far right side, the ITPR is engaged again to review the project as completed. And then at the end, issue approval certificates indicating that the project complies with the PACE requirements. So let's take a look at the technical report structure. This is what we call the energy and water analysis. And again, this can be done by the contractor or an engineer engaged by the contractor. There's not a third party requirement here. The energy and water analysis really is foundational. It's the base of all of these projects. Each project is required to have this completed, and it has to conform to the technical standards that we've outlined that are on our website. We'll show you those in a moment. Again, can be performed by an independent contractor, engineer, someone involved with the project with the owner. There's two key components. The baseline analysis, typically you're looking at a year or so of utility expenditures as the baseline, weather adjusted, and there's a standard way of doing that. And then projecting the savings from the improvements after the project's completed. There's then a report that is developed that captures all this information. And if an outside engineer or contractor is engaged to do this, the cost of this can be rolled into the project, and most often is. So while there may be an out-of-pocket expense initially for the cost of this, that cost can be reimbursed to the owner, as the cost of the analysis can be rolled into the project and the financing. And again, that usually is what happens. So the analysis itself, the extent of the project really depends on the nature of the project, how deep we go in the analysis. And we've come up with two sort of, I guess, informal designations to characterize these approaches. These are in our guidelines. One is what we call a fast track approach, and this is really almost like a desk spreadsheet type analysis for single measures. This would be something like replacing just HVAC with AC, HVAC of the same type and same size and same tonnage, and you're just looking at run hours, common run hours, plus efficiency rating of the old versus new equipment. So like-to-like replacement. Could be the same for lighting. Lighting can be done in a very simple way. And then also, if the project is just distributed generation, so things like rooftop solar, it's a straightforward analysis to look at solar radiation data and maps that are available. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory, part of Department of Energy, has the solar radiation data. That combined with the output of the system or the rating of the system, and you can calculate what the value of the solar generation is over a year's time. and then extrapolate that to the assessment period. So that's a pretty straightforward analysis as well. And then the full assessment is a more complex model, and this is typically where you have multiple measures within a building. You have a baseline situation that needs to be identified, and then you need to measure or model savings against that baseline situation. So this is really kind of like an ASHRAE level 2 analysis. If you're familiar with that, there's an ASHRAE 1, 2, and 3. This is sort of the mid-level, and so that would be appropriate for a more complicated multi-measure project. We also have run into some unconventional scenarios. In the case of a vacant or partially vacant building, sometimes modeling is required if there's no actual utility data, and that's okay. That can be done. Again, this is going to be using sort of engineering assumptions and best practices. So that can certainly be done. And then in the case of building repositioning, this is where you have, say, a warehouse that is being converted into apartments and retail or things like that. Then again, we're looking at modeling, and it may be that we use for this modeling purpose the existing minimum code requirements, energy code requirements, and then we compare the improved situation to the minimum code requirements. And it may be that to qualify, if code requires a certain efficiency rating for air conditioning systems, that you may need to go higher than that to qualify. So that's a means of doing this too. And certainly there's situations like this that have been funded through PACE in these unconventional repurposing building projects. So we have some experience looking at that too. So if you look at the very bottom bullet there, we would calculate the energy savings by saying the code compliant usage less the projected equipment usage. So that's a way to achieve that if you don't have a lot of that baseline information. The report template we have, and this is to try to standardize these for review and also consistency in the project files, looks like this. The copy of this format or template is on our website. If you look over the table of contents side, what you'll see, it's pretty common information for projects of this type. Just a brief executive summary, the utility analysis, if available, again, for a baseline calculation, the facility overview, the proposed improvements, and then qualifications of whoever it is that is doing the actual analysis themselves. So common format that's used so you're not having to recreate the wheel each time. The technical standards that I mentioned, the Texas PACE Authority has published, and this is on our website for download and for use, how we go about analyzing baseline and improved conditions and ensuring that projects meet the PACE requirements. So when these were put together, I'm going to backtrack a little bit and say that when the PACE law passed, oftentimes when new laws pass, there is then a state agency that may be delegated the authority to develop rules, a second level of specificity on how that law is implemented, and then there may be guidelines after that. With PACE, there was no agency designated to do that secondary level of specificity, and so these technical standards were developed by really a group of experts and volunteers in the field over a period of years to ensure that the projects that move forward met all the requirements. So the technical standards manual is based on nationally accepted standards. This is not a clean sheet. It's something that if you're in this business, you probably are familiar with these standards already. And then as far as the independent third-party reviewer, what is required there is that be a Texas licensed PE with energy or water efficiency experience. So a Texas licensed PE with structural experience may not be the right person. So you're looking for someone that probably has mechanical or electrical engineering experience and has some practical knowledge and work experience in doing these sorts of analysis. And then some of the preferred certifications, they may be part of ASHRAE, the Association of Energy Engineers, or Building Commissioning Association. The guidelines are on our website. You can look at them here under the program documents, downloadable. We have them in English and in Spanish. And as improvements and updates are made, this particular version is from 2018. That's the last time that significant changes were made. We're making some changes and updates now. We try to keep this live and updated as much as possible. And so those changes will be reflected in newer versions. I see a couple of questions coming in. Please keep those coming in and I'll address those at the end. So the third-party review. This is the second box. We've moved from the contractor who's done the energy analysis now to the independent third-party reviewer. And we call this sort of the before review, savings review. And this involves a couple of things. The reviewer will do a few things in its certification. They will say that they meet the ITPR qualifications, so engineer, et cetera. They don't have a conflict of interest. They reviewed the savings and baseline. They reviewed the useful life of the project, and they made a professional determination that it's qualified under the guidance. And we're going to look at all these a little more in depth. So the ITPR, Texas PE with energy water experience, again, and one of the following designations or certifications. We'd like them, the engineer, the ITPR, to have at least 5 years of relevant project experience in energy or water efficiency. When you're doing modeling on integrated complex building systems, it takes some time to understand in the field how that works. And so someone coming into this new may not be as well positioned. So there are many of these engineers available that are doing work all over the state. And that's the ITPR background and qualifications that we're looking for on these projects. There's also, again, this is a third party reviewer, so they have to make a statement in their certification that there's an arm's length relationship. They have no conflict of interest. And the statements that we have there that are included are below. Then they do two things. They certify that they performed a site visit. This can be an agent designated by the engineer. In some cases, you may not want to have an engineer billing at the rates they do involved in a site visit if an agent or an associate could go do that work. But ultimately, the engineer is going to have to sign off on it and say, yes, this represents the baseline conditions. So that can be done by the engineer or an agent of the engineer. They've reviewed the baseline analysis and the projected use scenario. That's really the desk review component. So there's a physical on site and a desk review component. And then they've concluded that the reductions in utility use are realistic and reasonable. Again, this is a professional opinion. And that the period of the assessment does not exceed the useful life of the project. The cost of the ITPR review can be rolled into the project as well. So not only the baseline, the initial cost, but this ITPR cost, and in every case that we've seen, I think they are. Fifth, the ITPR certifies that it's a qualified project under the PACE Act. Again, that's a professional opinion. That it is a permanent improvement fixed to real property. That's one qualifier. In this case, permanent doesn't mean forever, like 100 years. Permanent means at least as long as the assessment. So if the assessment is 20 years, that the improvement be installed and is expected to last at least 20 years. And then it's also intended to decrease energy or water consumption or demand. And these are some of the specific things under that. So again, we rely really on engineers to do this quality assurance and field work. So it moves from the ITPR savings review into project construction. The project moves forward, is completed, and then the ITPR comes back and does an installation verification. And that looks like this. They issue a statement of compliance, and they'll certify that, again, they meet the ITPR qualifications. They don't have a conflict. they performed a site visit or one has been performed on their behalf, and that the improvements have been completed and are operating as intended. So that's the second visit. So moving on to resources to help you in the field work through this process. We have several on our website, the Texas PACE Authority .com, which is the main website. It's menu driven. You can go across the top and there's a number of different resources and tools available. Our program guide and technical standards that we looked at earlier are available there. The most updated versions will always be listed there, so those will be the ones to use. We have under our events and training different opportunities for technical training, for overview of financing, a lot of different things. Some of these are recorded and some of them are static, but you can go there. What's highlighted in red is very soon, we're hoping just after the first of the year, that we will have available online contractor training. And so this is something that you can do at your own pace. It will be a 3-part series, probably 3 45-minute or so webinars on different aspects of PACE. And then there will be a test at the end to test proficiency and understanding. And if you pass that, then you can be listed as a certified service provider on our website. So that'll be coming soon. Look for that just after the first of the year. We then have a variety of different case studies. So if you're trying to understand better, how a project could be assembled, what could be included, the types of projects that are there, those are under our case studies. And then the Texas State Energy Conservation Office has information on PACE as well. We do have a recorded technical standards webinar, which if you go to our website under resources and education, and then look under webinars, you'll see the technical standards page. And it looks like this. There are 6 parts to it. It's an in-depth review of all the technical standards. And again, this can be viewed at your leisure, either all at once, or you can pause and stop and look at it one part at a time. So that's an excellent overview as well. And then what we've started doing this year, understanding that with COVID travel limitations, that in-person trainings are challenging for everyone. So we put together a series of technical webinars that are listed here. Parts 1 and 2 for service providers, one for capital providers that was done in June. Utility incentives, covering that. This is essentially money on the ground. PACE projects typically are going to qualify for utility incentives, and so those should be pursued and factored into the project costs. And then for property owners, most recently, these are recorded. These are on our YouTube channel, and we're expecting to continue these in 2021 as well, with probably updates of some of these topics and then covering other topics as well. So with that, I'll take a look and see what questions. I saw a few come in, and as service providers and contractors, we need you. Our organization, we simply administer the programs. We don't do work in the field. We don't provide financing. And so having an engaged service provider community is really key for the success of PACE. So one of the questions that came in is code compliant usage is based upon what code level. The original codes when built were standard basis like ASHRAE 90.1 2009. That's an excellent question. And what we use is the most recent minimum code, commercial code adopted by the State Energy Conservation Office, which currently is the International Energy Conservation Code 2015, which I believe aligns with ASHRAE 90.1 2013. So that is the minimum uniform energy code statewide, and absent baseline calculation information such as utility bills, anything above 2015, the IECC 2015 or the ASHRAE 90.1 2013 standards would be what qualifies a PACE project. So good question there. I don't see other questions, so at at this point, we're wrapping up, looks like maybe wrapping up a little bit early. Actually, one more came in. Let's see. What about baseline development? Baseline development, I guess there's two approaches. One, if utility information, utility data is available, that's the best way to do it, particularly on a comprehensive project. Looking at consumption numbers, utility rates, weather adjusted, standard sort of an ASHRAE 2 level audit. That would be what would be preferred. Absent that, again, if there is one of these unconventional scenarios or you're repurposing where that information is not available, then we would use the minimum statewide code, the IECC 2015 ASHRAE 90.1 2013 as the baseline assumption. So that's the way we'd approach that. Looking to see if there's anything else. Well, this is my email address. If you have questions after this, please email and we'll be happy to respond. Also, we'll be posting this webinar as well as others that are available, with the others that are available on our website for viewing later. And we hope that this has been useful to you. We know this doesn't answer every question you have or may come across, so please do email if you have specific questions. And we look forward to working with you as PACE projects move forward. And with that, we will end for today. Thank you.